Hey, it's Jacob. Welcome to my channel. Today I want to talk about how to automate Excel with Python in 2022. In this video, I want to give you a way to automate your Excel tasks with 3 simple lines of code in Python. I'll also talk about VBA versus Python to automate Excel, how to avoid struggling when using a programming language, and I'll give you a step-by-step action plan to keep building on those 3 lines of code to gradually automate more and more complex tasks. So make sure to keep watching till the end if you don't want to miss out on that. So here is the thing. You might have important but time-consuming and very repetitive administrative tasks that you need to do with Excel. And when you're doing that task, you might feel like you're wasting your actual skills on a task that a 10-year-old could be doing. And so in order to stop wasting your time, you might have tried to learn VBA, but you realized that it was taking too much time and you didn't have enough time. So you might feel like you have that weird paradox where you don't want to waste your time, but you don't have enough time to learn a programming language. So you might have heard about Python to automate Excel tasks, but you don't want to risk wasting your time learning about it because you're not even sure that it will actually solve your problems. If you're at that point, you might feel annoyed because you're kind of running out of options. So first, let's clarify a few things about VBA. That's what you hear all the time. You should learn VBA if you deal with Excel files. And it makes sense because it's pre-installed with Excel. So if you're in an environment where you can't install anything on your computer, then VBA is a good option. If this is the case, then learn VBA because you won't be able to install Python. Now, if it's not the case and you get to choose between VBA and Python, here is a few things you need to know about VBA. If you're an absolute beginner and you're starting with VBA, there are ways to do a few things very useful with VBA right from the start, but chances are you're probably not going to fully understand what you're doing. And why is that? Well, because right from the start, you'll have to deal with objects. So what's the problem with objects? Well, the first thing that is wrong with it is if you're an absolute beginner, you probably don't know what an object is, and you probably don't know the difference between object-oriented programming and procedural programming. And objects have methods and hidden properties and so on and so forth. And unless you have a programming background, I've seen a lot of people struggling with it. And the truth is, quite frankly, I'm struggling with it myself. I don't have a heavy programming background. I'm an electrical engineer. And right now, I'm talking to people specifically that are not programmers or developers or software engineers. Now, I'm not saying not to do it because it can be done for sure. I'm just telling you about the problems that you might encounter if you're learning VBA as a first programming language. If you know the problems ahead of time, you might be better prepared and less likely to give up. And so, as counterintuitive as it is, I would advise against learning VBA as a first programming language if you are dealing with automating Excel. I know it can be confusing because VBA is the programming language pre-installed in Excel. Plus, people say that it's easy to learn, which I'm sure is true for them. So it makes sense if you made that mistake in the past. Now, what I would recommend in 2022, if you're an absolute beginner, is an easy-to-use programming language for absolute beginners. In other words, something that is specific to your situation. That's the reason why Python is a good option if you are in that situation. Now, people say that Python is an object-oriented programming language, which is true. And you might think, well, you just said that that was the thing that made VBA difficult to learn. So what's the difference? Well, the difference is you don't have to use them, or if you have to use them, these are very simple objects that are not difficult to understand. And in fact, you don't need to understand them. You can copy and paste those parts that are doing those specific things using objects. Basically, you can use them without knowing anything at all about objects. I'm going to give you a very simple example of this in a second so that you can actually see what it looks like. And the reason why it's easier to learn it that way is because it requires 1 line of code per step you do in Excel. Let me give you an example. If step 1, you want to read an Excel file, step 2, open a new one, and step 3, copy and paste a cell to the new Excel file, this is 3 steps and therefore it should be 3 lines of code. Now, the truth is it doesn't need to take time to learn Python if you're doing the right things. So what are the right things? If you're cooking something and you have all the ingredients but you don't have the recipe, then it's not going to work. So in that analogy, the ingredients are the lines of code and the recipe is everything else. How do you install everything? What is the environment needed? What is the basic architecture? How do you create a clear code overview of what you're going to do? And if you feel like it takes too long to learn all those things and you don't have time for it, then don't freak out, because it's a good sign. The fact that there is more things for you to learn means that it's going to take less time, not more time. And if you think that it doesn't make any sense, well, let's think about it for a recipe. If you only have the ingredients, then it's going to take time for you to figure out how to do everything else. But if you have the full recipe with everything detailed in the right order, with the right dosage, effectively you have more information, but is that going to take you more time? And is that going to be more difficult? And the answer is it's going to be 10 times easier and 10 times faster. Now, why would it be different when you learn programming? Right now, I won't give you all the steps because I don't want this video to be hours and hours, and I have a full online course that you can access for free in the description if you want to know everything. But I'm going to give you a real-world example of how you can use Python to access a cell in an Excel file. So here is the code. First, there is only 3 lines here, because the lines with the pound sign at the beginning are comments. So the 3 lines of code are lines 2, 5, and 8. In line 2, you're reading the Excel file named Excel file, and you're putting the content of that Excel file into a variable named book. Now, that variable contains every single cell in that Excel file. Line 5 is to select one sheet in that Excel file so that you can access every cell from that specific sheet. Here, we're selecting the sheet that is at the very left of your Excel file. We know that because the index here is 0. If we replace it by 1, it's going to select the sheet right next to it. That's how you can select the sheet you want, and that's it. In line 8, you select the cell in that sheet. In this example, you select the 3rd row and the 5th column. So that's all you need to know. Now that you know how to access a cell in an Excel file, let me give you a 3-step action plan to keep building on those 3 lines of code. The first step would be using the code to copy and paste one single cell from one file to another. The second step is multiplying the number in that cell. If you think about it, when you know how to do step 1 and 2, you can generate Excel reports with Python. Because from there, you know how to extract an Excel file and you know how to use the information from that Excel file to create another one. Here, we're just multiplying the number, but you can process the information any way you want. And that's step 3. When you know how to do that, you can start building on it. You can start thinking about real tasks that you're doing right now in Excel. Now, if you think it's too much or the task is too complicated, then break down that task into single steps and start with one of those steps. Now, what can you do from there? Well, there is a lot of things you can do. Report generators, automatic Excel formatting, automate redundant data entry, PDF form fillers based on Excel files, avoiding making errors in redundant data entry, automate time-consuming and very repetitive administrative tasks. The list is endless. Now tell me in the comments, I'd be curious to know what specific task would you like to be able to do in Excel using Python. Have a great day and see you in the next video.